Hello. So I thought I'd make a part 3 in this video. This question of team value versus information. I've been thinking more about it, and I wanted to try and think about the question specifically of how much is 0.1 million worth in points. I said at the start of this season that I planned to not get into FPL too much, but here I am, like tinkering like crazy again. I find FPL kind of, well, it's partly addictive, a little bit addictive, and it's also kind of fascinating as well. It's like always feels like tantalizingly solvable. Everything feels like there's an answer to it, and so I've been sucked in. But I've got to watch that. I've got to kind of get out of it again. But I just wanted to answer. I just wanted to share what I found about this question of how much is 0.1 mil worth. So just to recap, so the first two videos I did, if you haven't seen them, this question of is it better to chase price rises and go early, take the risk, or is it better to wait for information? The first video I made, I reckoned I had this 1 in 40 number. So when you go early on a transfer, I reckon there's about a 1 in 40 chance that the player you're bringing in will get some sort of red flag, which is 98% chance you'll be fine. This is based on this from last season. There's like the top 100 players. I think it's the most selected players. I can't remember actually, but it's top 100 players most selected, I think. And you look at their minutes each game week. This is their minutes each game week. And then this in between is the amount of transfers in of each player. So in the first game week, you had Haaland, 1.1 million people transferred him in. Zinchenko, 0.6 mil. And this is how many minutes everybody played. And every now and then you get like one red flag, like Chilwell didn't start, so maybe late information would have helped you with that. But on the whole, it's about a 1 in 40 chance. Second game week, all these millions of people transferred players in and they all started. So if you transferred them in at the start of the week, would have been fine, your player would have played. So basically a 1 in 40 chance. But then the second video I realised that it's not just the player you're bringing in who you need to worry about, it's your whole team, the rest of your team, because a red flag could emerge in all of those players as well. So, and that might make you regret your early transfer. So it's probably more like about a 1 in 4 chance. This is just rough, my numbers that I'm going with. 1 in 4 chance. So if you won't go early on a transfer every single game week, the odds are 75% of the time you'll be fine, but 25% every 25% you'll get stung, is my guess at the moment. Could be wrong. So that's what I came up with. And then I thought, well, so if in like an 8 game week period, if you went early on every single game week chasing all these price rises, you might get stung twice. 1 in 4, that's twice. So that's 8. And worst case scenario, you just do a hit. So that's an 8-point hit. But the amount of money you could accrue over that period is about 1 million over the person who waited, which, because you only get half your selling price, is probably evens out at about 500,000, something like that. So I was asking myself the question, how much does 500,000 pay? How much did it buy in points? How much is it worth? So that's the question I wanted to ask now. Long story short, the safe answer is it's about 2 points. It's the common answer, but I think it could be as much as 4 or 6, but I'm not sure. But the safe answer is 2. But there's a question first to ask, which is, some people say the team value, the whole pricing in FPL has gotten so low that it doesn't even matter anymore because you can afford everybody. And I wanted to look into that question first. So this is the last like 7 odd seasons, and I looked at the you'll notice these trend arrows are going down. So whether this is the top points per game players, the top 250 points per game players, top 100, top 50, top 25, top 15 points per game players each season. And then it's the average price of them multiplied by 15 each position. It's very crude. I just wanted to get a rough idea of how much the pricing has been going down, and you do see it goes down. So how to explain this? So like back in 2016-17, the top 250 players, the average price multiplied by 15, it was about 86 million. So you could easily afford that. But the top 15 multiplied by 15 was 147 million. And if you come down to like 22, 23, like the top 50 odd, the top 50 players in the game basically cost about 103 million. Again, this is just a rough guide. That's not technically true because you got your bench and you got other things to think about. But it's like that came to about 103, whereas the top 25 was about where is it? Top 25 is 112 million, and the top 15 was 127 million. And basically, on this first kind of like way of looking at it, my feeling was that yes, the prices are getting less. So it is becoming more and more affordable to fit, to buy all your players. But my feeling is that there's always something more that you can do with your team. And if you're happy to just like pick from the pool of the top 50 players and you can afford them, then maybe you don't need to go for the extra price rises and stuff. But for me, I always feel like there's always a top 25 and a top 15. I want to get as many of those top 15 players in my team as possible, or even the top 25. I mean, the top 25 here was 112 million to afford all of them. Again, rough numbers, but just that's my sense of like there's always somebody more you can buy. And I mean, there's always a possibility that what if like Salah goes off, Trent starts smashing it in, KDB comes back and he's playing well, and Son does well, and all these what if the high price players all start performing well? If you've got more money than your competitor, you might be able to get an extra premium in there. So I'm still inclined to think that money does matter, my personal instinct, but I'm also feel like I'm a bit biased because I almost feel like I want it to matter. I don't want the game to be kind of boring. I want it to be interesting in that sense. So there's that. What was I going to say about that? There's always more that you can do. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Forget this season. That's just the data isn't. It's only got 3 game weeks of data, so I shouldn't have even put it in there. Sure, there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. But then I also had a little look at this, which I don't really know what it means, but this is like the landscape of the pricing of FPL over the last 7 or 8 seasons. And as you can see, so this is the top 100 points per game players. This is the price of each player in that top 100. So there's 100 points along there. That is the price of each player. And back in 2016-17, the line was a lot linear, a lot more smoother. Then you come back to like last season, and it seems like each season it's getting more and more kind of exponential rather than linear. And there's like it's kind of gouged out a big space here, where if you back in 2016-17, the number of players over 8 million, there was like 25 players priced over 8 million in the top points per game players, whereas last season there was only like 9 players over 8 million, sorry. So that's like the landscape, and I'm not sure what that means. You might think that means so we don't need to spend as much money, which is partly true, but then it still comes out like this. The graphs still come out like this, that there's still like the top 15 players cost you 127 million, top 25 is going to cost you 112 million. So I'm not sure it's entirely true, but maybe it's moving in that direction a bit. But I want to come back to this later because I'm not quite sure what that means. If anybody knows what that means and has any insights of how that's going to affect things. It used to be much more linear, and there's a lot more like 6 mil players. All of these players all around the 6 mil range, between 8 and 6 mil. Whereas now there's just huge amounts of players who are under 8 mil, much closer to 6 mil, going down to 4 mil, 5 mil. So basically all the prices have got cheaper. So that's true as well. Is that basically come down? Anyway, so I'll leave that there though, because I'm not sure what else to say about that. But the question then, so how much is 0.1 million worth? So team value it is going down, but I still think there's something, it's worth it for these really for that extra edge. So how much is 0.1 mil worth? There was a podcast, I should have found the link, but I'll put it in the description below, where apparently Mikkel Tokvam put it as about 2 points. And I found a Reddit page and some people were talking about it there. And somebody else said he had done some calculations and it came to about 2.2. And that makes sense, because if you think 0.1 times by 1,000 is 100 million, and 2 points times by 1,000 is about 2,000 points. And that's generally what we get with normally with a 100 mil budget. We normally end up on around about 2,000, a bit more. So maybe that's just how they worked it out. That seems quite intuitive. And I also had a look into myself, because I was thinking, well, how would I work this out? So the first way I looked at it is I got all the data from 2016 to 22, and I put every single player, every single game week, the points they got, their price, and then just divided the points by their price to get a kind of points per 0.1 million number per game. I cut it off at 60 minutes because when we play FPL, any player we have in our team who's not starting, maybe I should have cut it off at 50, but any player who's not starting, we generally get rid of them from our teams and get somebody else in. So I did do that, and then so you get this number of points per price per game. Then you multiply that by 38, and I got a number of 2.4. So, Mikkel Tokvam got 2. Some other guy I heard got 2.2. I've got 2.4. It's all round about that number. Perhaps because I took out all the earlier numbers, the 60 and below, it might have been closer to 2. But so that's like a starting point number. But the problem I have with that number is that it's random. As in, that number basically means that if you had 6.9 mil and you were you bought a 7 mil player, just absolute random, 1,000 times over 1,000 seasons, and you did that, on average you'd end up with 2.4 points more better off, or something like that, I think. But that's not the way we play FPL. We don't just spend our money randomly. We spend it highly selectively. We spend huge amounts of time trying to find the absolute gem, which means that points should be a lot higher than that. So I did another method. I tried another method, and let's see, this is the one to see. So I basically went through each season and I looked at the top 100 players in different ways of measuring it. This was points per game again. So the top 100 players last season, points per game. So you've got Haaland at the top, Kane, Salah, Rashford, Odegaard, De Bruyne, all the best players. And I took their points per game rate, multiplied it by 38, which is, I don't think it matters too much if it's not perfect. I'm just trying to get a rough number of, if you had a player playing 90 minutes every game at that rate for the whole season, Haaland would have ended up on 296 points. It's a bit of an overestimate. I don't think it matters, though, to the numbers. Anyway, so I did that. Then I took every player in the game and compared their points to every other player, not every player in the game, that top 100, and compared their points to the rest of the players in that top 100. So Haaland is 34.2 points better than Kane, and he's 57 points better than Salah, and on and on and on. Let's get the whole cross-section grid. Then I looked at the points, the price difference. So Haaland is 0.9 million more expensive than Kane, but he's 0.7 million cheaper than Salah, and on and on and on. Then I just divided points by price again. So that's the points by price. So you're trying to find how many points per 0.1 million each transfer would buy you. How much would 0.1 million buy you? So like Haaland to Kane. Haaland was 34.2 points better than Kane, and 0.9 million more expensive. That's right, yeah, more expensive. So that's 3.8 points per 0.1 million, basically. If you were in that situation, you had Kane, you wanted to get to Haaland, somebody who's got 0.9 million more than you can get to Haaland, that's going to be worth 34 points, 3.8 per 0.1 million, if that makes sense. And then the final thing I did was I also deleted all of the negative numbers. And the reason I did that, I'm trying to recreate the selectivity that we have when we're playing FPL. So, and the negative numbers are basically, if you've got there are two situations. If you've got a player who's more expensive but predicted less points, so there'll be a negative number there, positive versus a negative. If you've got a more expensive player but he's predicted less points, you're not going to buy him. Like, we're not going to be spending that money. So we're just going to, in our minds, we're going to be getting rid of those. So I got rid of them here. And the other one is if you've got a player who's cheaper in price but predicted more points. And in that situation, you would just downgrade anyway. I'm not really interested in those situations because I'm interested in those. I think there's always a point somewhere in your team where you can make an upgrade. Once you've done all the downgrades, there's always somewhere where you can make an upgrade. So I'm just interested in those places in the team where you can make upgrades. Pardon me. So I think that makes sense. Maybe not. Tell me if I've made an error. But I just wanted to get a sense of, adding that selectivity that we have. And then I just took all the averages and you get a score. And this one comes up at 2.98. So it's a little bit higher than the 2. And so I did that with lots and lots of different ways of looking at it. So that was that method, with the points per game rate. You have, it comes out like this. So it's like it ranges from 2.89 points up to almost 4 points when you do it like this. And interestingly enough, the trend line goes upwards. And all of these, the trend line is going upwards, which I find that's another mystery I don't actually know the answer to. As the trend lines up here are coming down, so the price is getting cheaper, the prices are getting cheaper, the relative amount of amount of points that 0.1 will buy you seems to buy you more. And I'm not quite sure if that's true or whether I've made an error, but that's how the data's coming out. So if anybody has any answers to that, let me know. But yeah, this method, it comes out that it's 0.1 million is actually worth about 2 to 4 points. I also looked at the most selected players various ways. There's the most selected on the final day of the season with all their final points data. And then I did another one where the most selected players at any point in the season. So just, Haaland game week 9 or something might have been highly selected. De Bruyne game week 21, second most highly selected, all that kind of stuff. And just got the 100 most selected players like that, just to kind of see if it made a difference. Using the most selected players, it comes out a lot higher. I'm not sure why that is either. Comes out like 4 to 6 points. So 0.1 million could be worth 4 to 6 points. I think it all depends on how you spend that 0.1 million. How selective there are times when 0.1 million can mean the difference, can mean a massive difference. You can get really lucky. There could just be a player who's just way better than another and you just can't quite afford them. You need that little bit of extra money. But then other times it doesn't help at all. So I don't know. This is just all the averages it's coming out at. So what did I want to say about that? I think 2 points per 0.1 million is a safe bet, but it could be as much as 3, 4, 5, 6 points. And I'm not solid on this, but I'm kind of think I can't really see what I've done wrong in that kind of way of looking at it. This is kind of how we select between players, and this is the average amount. Problem with data is sometimes you can miss something. So yeah, there might be something I've missed there. But it's interesting though that the more selectivity you put onto it, the more it goes above 2 points. And the reason why I'm also cautious about that number when it gets up to like 6 points is like we don't normally finish the season on like 6,000 points. We finish at around about 2,000, 2,400, 500 if we're lucky. So that's why that 2 to 2.5 number sounds about right. But then I'm wondering whether maybe not every 0.1 million is worth the same. And maybe there are kind of as an exponential curve to how much 0.1 is worth. My intuition is that you kind of think it would be a diminishing returns rather than exponential returns. So this is why I'm all confused, and this is why this graph, I'm trying to figure out what it means. Like that's going more and more exponential in that direction, but these trend lines are going that way, so that 0.1 million is actually becoming worth even more. Is that true? the 0.1 million has been worth. Feels like I've probably made an error somewhere. So anyway, so this video is not like conclusive. I don't have conclusive answers for you. I do have the 2 point though. I think the 2 point is a good base minimum that I feel comfortable going with. It could be more depending on how you spend that money. And the reason why this is all important is because I took a 12-point hit this week, which is a bit nuts, and I may have lost my mind a little bit. But the reasoning behind it is because I started thinking, well, how much is 0.1 million worth? And if you have a player at the start of the season who's fallen in price by 0.1 mil, and you've got another player who's going up in price by 0.1 mil, then if that 0.1 mil swing is worth 2 points, up and down, that's 4 points. So if those two players are absolutely equal in worth, it kind of means that it would be worth taking a 4-point hit to switch them, because of that extra, because that loss in value is actually potentially worth 2 points or 4 points. And so I started factoring that in. So I had like Martinelli was going down in price, Udogie was going up. I wanted both of them, and so I just kind of got it into my head of like, well, my model was telling me that Martinelli and Mitoma and Saliba out to Sterling, Foden and Udogie over the next 5 game weeks would be worth about 12 points. But now normally when it's that close, I don't do it. But when I added the actual price changes as well, I thought, well, that's probably an extra couple of points there as well, potentially. And I'll admit there was a fair amount of like reckless impulsivity thrown in there as well. It was a few hours before deadline, and I just fancied the punt, so I probably shouldn't have done it. But it was that logic of like, well, how much are these 0.1 mils worth, and maybe they are worth something. And I think that makes intuitive sense. I know there's a logic of like I don't know how most people view team value, but I think maybe they think it's it'll all work itself out. You think, I'll just let this price drop, don't worry about it, let that one go up, it all works itself out in the end. But I'm kind of thinking, I'm anticipating like wildcard 9, and I'm remembering the game week 1 wildcard and thinking how hard it was to get that 0.5 mil to find that extra change. And if I've got that extra 0.5 mil ahead of my competitor in game week 9, it might mean the difference between a Saka and a Martinelli or somebody, or maybe, as we go further down the line, I might be able to get that extra premium. Maybe I can get up to Trent. Maybe I can get that extra player. And I think it can be a difference. Well, according to this, it's, there's this kind of amount of difference, 2, 4, maybe 6 points per 0.1 millions, which is basically a way of saying it's over the course of a season, it's 10, 20, maybe 30 points per 0.5 million, per half a million, which I think makes some kind of intuitive sense. So, yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say, I think. Yep. So, 0.1 mil, it's at least worth 2 points, I think, is a safe bet. If you want to, and I do think team value matters if you really want to push it and get some of these top 25 players and top 15 players, there's always more money you could spend. I think more ways you can improve your team. And it could be, if you're very selective with how you spend that 0.1, it could be as much as like a 4 or 6 point swing per 0.1 million. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. So I'm afraid it's somewhat inconclusive. Some of it is kind of mysterious. I don't really know why the trend lines are going in different directions. As the prices, as the team value is coming down, the worth of 0.1 million is going up. I'm not sure why, but anyway, I will leave it there. That's all my thoughts for that. Okay, have a nice day. Bye bye.